The diplomatic chamber aboard the Valtorian flagship gleamed with bioluminescent panels that pulsed in rhythm with the ship's heartbeat. Queen Lysara of the Valtori Empire stood before the viewing portal, her crystalline scales shifting from deep violet to furious crimson as she processed the medical report hovering before her eyes. "Impossible," she hissed, her voice carrying the harmonic undertones that marked her royal lineage. "Run the analysis again." Dr. Kelvin Hayes, the human physician assigned to the Joint Research Initiative, cleared his throat nervously. He had been warned that the Valtori were a proud species, but nothing prepared him for the raw fury radiating from the 7-foot queen before him. "Your Majesty, I've run it 4 times. The results are conclusive." He pulled up the genetic sequencing on the holographic display. "You're carrying a viable hybrid embryo. Conception occurred approximately 3 standard days ago. The queen's secondary arms, normally kept folded against her torso during diplomatic functions, unfurled in a threat display that made Kelvin take an involuntary step backward. Her black eyes, all 3 of them, fixed upon him with an intensity that could have melted steel. "This was supposed to take months, human. Your species was selected for this program, specifically because of your genetic incompatibility with ours." Her tail lashed behind her, knocking over a ceremonial vase that shattered across the polished floor. The previous 7 species required extensive laboratory intervention, multiple attempts, careful genetic modification. Kelvin nodded slowly, pulling up his own data pad. "Yes, well, that's what makes this fascinating from a xenobiological perspective. Human reproductive cells are remarkably adaptable. Our evolutionary history involved significant genetic diversity, and I don't want a lecture on human evolution." Lysara's voice rose to a frequency that made the viewing portal crack. "Do you understand what you've done? The breeding program was meant to be a symbolic gesture, a scientific curiosity that would take years to yield results, if any. It was supposed to demonstrate our species' commitment to cross-cultural understanding through controlled, dignified research." The queen turned away, her robes swirling around her like storm clouds. "Instead, I must now inform my council that their sovereign has been impregnated on the first attempt by a species that still uses combustion engines on half their colony worlds." Kelvin bristled at that. "Hey now, that's not entirely fair. We've made significant technological advances in the past century." "You eat food with sticks," Lysara shot back. "That's a cultural choice, not a technological limitation." The queen whirled to face him again, and Kelvin was struck by how her anger somehow made her more magnificent. The Valtori were already considered the most beautiful species in the known galaxy, with their iridescent scales and graceful movements. But fury added a terrible majesty to her presence. "This will change everything," she said, her voice dropping to something almost vulnerable. "The council chose me for this program because I am the youngest queen in 5 generations. I have no mate bond, no heir. They thought it safe to volunteer me for scientific collaboration because nothing would come of it." Understanding dawned on Kelvin. "But now you're carrying a hybrid child, which means every political faction in the Empire will claim this as either a blessing or a curse, depending on their agenda." Lysara moved to her throne and sank into it with uncharacteristic weariness. "The traditionalists will call for its termination. The progressives will hail it as the future of interspecies cooperation. And I will be caught in the middle of a firestorm that could destabilize centuries of careful governance." Kelvin approached cautiously, his medical training overriding his sense of self-preservation. "Your Majesty, may I speak freely?" She gestured with one hand in what he had learned was Valtorian assent. "I've studied your species' reproductive biology extensively for this project. Valtori queens only become fertile once every 10 standard years, and the window lasts less than a week. The fact that conception occurred at all suggests that this wasn't just random chance. What are you implying, human?" I'm saying that maybe your biology recognized something in human genetic material that it found compatible. Desirable, even. Our species might be technologically younger, but we've survived ice ages, pandemics, wars, and our own stupidity. We're adaptable, resilient. Those might be exactly the traits your species needs. Lysara was quiet for a long moment, her scales slowly shifting from crimson back toward their usual violet. The Volturi Empire has ruled this sector for 3,000 years. Dr. Hayes, we have achieved pinnacles of art, science, and culture that most species can only dream of. But we've also become stagnant. Our population grows slowly. Our innovation has plateaued. We are, as you might say, stuck in our ways. She stood again, moving to the viewport to gaze out at the stars. When the council approved the breeding program, I think some of them secretly hoped it would fail, that it would prove our superiority, our genetic isolation. But others, the ones who truly understand our empire's decline, they hoped for exactly this. A shake-up, Kelvin offered. A revolution, Lysara corrected. Your people have a saying, don't they? About hybrid vigor? We do. When you combine diverse genetic lines, you often get offspring that's stronger than either parent. The queen touched her abdomen with one slender hand, her expression unreadable. I am furious, Dr. Hayes. Furious that this happened so quickly. Furious that my choices have been stripped away. Furious that I must now navigate politics I never wanted to face. She turned to look at him directly. But I am also terrified and strangely hopeful and completely unprepared for any of this. Kelvin smiled gently. If it helps, Your Majesty, my species has been unprepared for parenthood for our entire existence. We still managed to muddle through. A sound emerged from the queen that might have been a laugh. Is that supposed to be reassuring? Not particularly, but it's honest. Lysara returned to her throne, her posture regaining some of its regal bearing. Very well, Dr. Hayes. You will remain as my personal physician throughout this pregnancy. I suspect I will need someone who understands both species involved in this biological catastrophe. It would be my honor, Your Majesty. Don't be honored yet. When the Council learns of this, you may find yourself at the center of an interstellar incident. She pulled up a communication array. I must inform the Empress Regent. She will be less than pleased. As the Queen began composing her message, Kelvin gathered his medical equipment. He paused at the door, turning back to address her one final time. Your Majesty, for what it's worth, I think you'll make an excellent mother. You clearly care deeply about your people and your responsibilities. That's more than half the battle. Lysara looked up from her work, her expression softening almost imperceptibly. You humans and your optimism. It's simultaneously your most endearing and most infuriating quality. We aim to please. Leave before I have you thrown in the detention cells. Kelvin left, but not before catching the slightest hint of amusement in the Queen's voice. As he walked through the corridors of the Volturian flagship, he couldn't help but think about the implications of what had just occurred. Humanity had been the newcomers to the galactic community, often dismissed as primitive and impulsive by older species. But now, a human had accomplished what 7 other species could not, had bridged a gap thought unbridgeable, had created something entirely new with one of the most powerful beings in the sector. The political ramifications would be enormous. The scientific discoveries, invaluable. The cultural exchange, unprecedented. And somewhere in the midst of all that history and consequence, a child would be born who belonged to 2 worlds, 2 species, 2 very different ways of seeing the universe. Kelvin smiled to himself as he made his way back to his quarters. Queen Lysara might be furious now, but he suspected that fury would transform into something far more powerful when she held her child for the first time. That was the thing about humans that other species often failed to understand. They didn't just survive. They connected. They bridged. They built families and communities across every barrier imaginable, even, apparently, across the stars themselves.